to breathe. It's burning my eyes, Lord, so hard to see. I'm quite parched now. I need a saying. Come quench my thirst, Lord. Yes. You're like water for the thirsty. I drink. You're like water for the thirsty. I drink. You're like water for the thirsty. I drink. Water for the thirsty. I drink.
It's like water for the thirsty. Truthfully, our souls parched. You will find them when you seek them with your whole heart. It's so hard. We stay consistent through the word I'm reading. Cause the time is coming soon when every eye gon' see him in the clouds above. This is about a love that quenches the thirst. What the world offers is not enough. Taste and see from this fountain spring, you'll be lining up to get a drink. Refreshing ink flowing out of cups. This life they gotta touch, you liberate them out of cuffs. The faith is undivided trust, created us up out of dust. He's worthy of fresh well of living water for the thirsty. Give an honor the first thing that I do when I'm waking up. It's everlasting life to all who decide to drink it up.
Like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. Like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. Like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty.
Oh, good night, everybody. Welcome to Water for the Thirsty. This is Jared and Ron and Marcella, and we're here representing the Third Friday crew. And we're here to chop it up about the word simply, the word refreshing. How's your week been?
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. I think that's the best
Was
word.
it good interesting or not so good interesting?
So that's the thing about interesting. You know, it could be good, bad. It could be both. It could be you don't even know what to make of it. That's how I look at interesting. And go, I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but I think the perspective I'm trying to come from with the way I look at how things play out is it happened, and now I just need to wait to see what the result of it was.
I got you. How about you, Marcella?
It was. I'm here.
Yeah.
It's been that kind of week, huh?
It's been that kind of week.
And then you have defining weeks.
Wow.
It's a blessing to be here.
Let's pray that the word today that we discuss, speaks to the week and provides some measure of encouragement. You know what I should ask? Did you find anything in the word this week that helped you through the week?
Yes.
That spoke to the happenings of the week.
That's part of why the week was interesting.
Okay, well, tell us
We had a
more.
lot of conversations.
Tell me more.
Yes, do tell.
Well, I mean, and that's like the point of what we're doing is not to just talk about this, but also be about as best we can what we understand. I think Paul said, and I believe it was like Philippians, live up to what you've attained.
Right.
And I think that's what we are held, the standard we're held to by God, and for judgment and for everything that we're doing in our lives. If we know to do certain things, those are the things that we must do. And until we do those things until we know to do something different.
Right.
So it's when we start doing these things that we find out that, okay, maybe I wasn't doing it right the entire time, but I would not have been able to advance had I not gotten to this point of just doing what I knew to do. Kind of like when your child starts doing things in the beginning, and like when they start walking,
Mm-hmm.
they're not walking like they're going to walk 10 years from now. They're just
They're figuring it out.
figuring it out. And we, I think, well, I won't say everyone, I'll just say me, disassociate that. Because we have knowledge, because we have wisdom, because our motor skills are intact, we think that we're doing it the way we're supposed to do it for the rest of our days. And then God comes in and shifts us.
So you used to walk with a lean, but now you're walking upright.
Now you're walking upright. And that's, or, well, you're moving towards upright.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
I get
because
you.
I don't think we ever see that while we're here. There's always going to be a shift. There's always going to be a ground tilt. There's always going to be a bum knee, something that causes us not to get that perfect walk. But the goal is to try our best to move towards it. And so, in saying all of that, that's what I've been noticing since we started to really like wrestle with things and then not allow it to escape throughout the week.
Okay.
So one of the biggest things we've been talking about is through lenses, how we see things.
Okay.
And I'm looking at this text through a different lens now. I'm seeing it, and then I'm seeing the message that the world is kind of sending. Now, I may be wrong in the message, but all right, so let's go here. I went to 1 Corinthians 10.
Mm-hmm. Good chapter.
I'm glad you said that. Because the whole chapter, for some reason, when I read it, it just became eye-opening for me. Like, I knew these things, but now I'm seeing it and I'm like, wait a minute.
Fresh eyes almost.
Fresh eyes. Paul, in his talking here, for some reason, made me to understand that the way that I should approach reading scripture and life should always be through a place of strength.
Okay.
Because that's where they came from. And that's where God comes from.
Okay.
Not from an arrogant, or not from a place of I'm opposed to the weak. Because Paul in this chapter says to the weak I'll become weak. But he doesn't say to the strong I'll become strong. Doesn't have to say that. All these messages that come throughout the text from the beginning, the Lord's message is always be strong. Be strong in me. His message to Joshua, be strong in me. His message to Moses was always about strength.
Mm-hmm.
And we wonder why. It's because he knows who he is. And he wants us to know who he is. But the only way we're going to know who he is to see as he wants us to see him.
Okay.
So when I read, let me pull, for some reason I had, it's like the whole chapter. The entire chapter just spoke to strength for me. And it also spoke to a strength that had to balance humility as opposed to coming from a weak place.
Okay.
And I found that throughout Scripture, God would rather deal with us in humbling us rather than trying to take weak and make you stronger.
Really?
I find so. Think about as we're going back through.
Isn't it both and?
All right, so I'll let you pull some, but my mind just immediately went to some of the things we've been talking about here. Like we talked about Moses, the parting of the sea, and the Israelites as Moses is given this powerful message.
Mm-hmm.
And then God responds with, what are you calling on me for? Use the staff, part the sea.
Yes.
And then we talked about...
But before he got to that place, he was like, I don't speak well, send somebody else.
Yeah.
And God was like, all right, I'm going to send your brother.
Hmm. Yeah, and he's also, even with Gideon, he did the same thing.
I don't think it's,
But-
it's not both ends.
So, I'm glad you said that. Because now we talk about how God understands intent and character,
Okay.
right? You can even bring up David. David, in all of the Psalms, seem to have this burden on him. And if you...
Rightly so. He was being chased around
Exactly.
town.
But when you really look at what he's saying, he always, of course, ends with this proclamation that God will deliver. And even to the point where he demanded that God put his hand back on his life.
Okay. David does that, but not all the psalmists do.
Right. That's what I said. So David, that's why I'm speaking specifically with David, because when we look through Psalm, we give him majority of the credit for those works. The message that he gave to, was it Ezekiel? Jeremiah. I think it was Ezekiel, where he told him that his wife's about to die and you can't cry.
Mm-hmm.
The other message for his people, and he said, you're going to go through things, I need you to be a certain way. It was always about strength. I need you to remember where you come from. I need you to remember what I did for you. And when certain characters tended to get a little light, Jeremiah, when he said, Jeremiah made the same excuse that Moses made. When he was like, I'm young and I can't, and he said to him, don't ever say that. I've called you. So now we look and we go, well, what's the difference? Moses, he knew, was strong. Jeremiah, he knew, I'm not buying that from you. Same way we look at Mary and John the Baptist's father.
Mm-hmm.
John the Baptist's father, nope. Mary, I'll deal with your questions. So, to me, that says, based on everything else that we see, if his message is always be strong in him, trust in him, listen to what I'm telling you, don't listen to anything else, it's resounding that it's all about strength. And if you are not, what is, okay.
I'm still listening. I'm not
No,
drawing
no.
any conclusion.
Yeah.
I'm processing out loud.
I don't want you to draw it because I'm going to present this. It's because it's fresh for me this week. I had yes. Christ, when he dealt with matters of faith, what was his tone when it came down to those kind of things? When people asked him something, or when they weren't displaying the level of faith that he believed or desired for them to have, was he passive? Was he understanding in there? Was he like, oh, it's okay, I know you don't know any better? Or was he, you foolish, you wicked generation? He came down hard on those things, from what I gathered through the text of Scripture. And why is that? Because he didn't want to leave any room for weakness in regards to worship. Why does he come down so hard on people who worship idols of wood and gold?
Does he come down hard on those people? Does
Which
he
ones?
come down hard on people who should know better? And or people who, for him, who he's interacting with, understands that they should have a different understanding, you know? Because I don't see him treating everybody the same way. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. I don't see him treating everybody the same way.
True, he doesn't. But
And
that's
those
what
people
I'm,
that he had on have a certain kind of relationship with him where that's going to work in the context of their relationship.
okay. So take the issue specific, faith. If we go through all of the examples in the Gospels, I can't find one where someone doesn't display the level of faith that he desires, and he's just like, no, it's okay. Even with the Samaritan woman.
Someone doesn't display the faith that he desires.
Right.
Who were the people who were not displaying?
Okay, let me find there's the gentleman who came to him and said, if you could heal. And his response was, if. What do you mean, if? And he came back and said, oh, no, you can't. You can heal. I don't know if that, I gotta find that one. I don't know if he was, I don't know his background. But I just remember the response. It was hard. For us. For
Difficult
me.
to tell from reading the page.
Right.
It's difficult to tell.
Well, it's like I said, I don't know. I can't remember his background. I don't know if he knew him. I don't know if this is somebody he's come across. But what I do know is when he said to Christ, "If you could heal," and the reaction was, "What do you mean if?" Like, don't display any doubt when you talk to me, because if you're coming to me, and if his words are true, where he says, "No one can come to me lest the Father who sent me sent you to me."
Let me ask you this: is confidence different than strength? Are they the same or are they related? What's the relationship between confidence and strength?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question.
Confidence versus strength.
Ask me that one more time.
Is there a difference between confidence and strength, or is there a relationship between confidence and strength? And if there is a
That's what I was waiting
relationship, what is the relationship? And if there's a difference, what is the difference?
That's what I was waiting for. Okay. Definitely a relationship between confidence and strength. Just as there's a relationship between confidence and faith. I don't think you can have one without the other with regards to faith and confidence.
Okay, there's confidence. It's confidence in the thing that you
Right.
don't see.
Yes. Confidence and strength. That is a really good
Confidence can
question.
inspire strength. Can contribute to strength.
I can't think of a
Can help to build strength.
True. True.
Right, because that is my question. What is strength to you?
Yeah.
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
We
And
win.
what is weakness
Yeah.
to you?
We winning. I don't think she was being rhetorical.
Yeah. Just that would help as you're
Oh,
explaining.
you're asking me? I'm
Yes.
just asking.
No, I was asking you since you're talking about that. I think it would help if people understood where you're coming from when you say strength.
Oh,
And when
okay.
you're saying weakness.
Okay. By that I mean, as opposed to weak and doubting.
But is doubting necessarily weakness?
Not
To add another element to that.
so. Doubting not necessarily weakness if you did not get the assured word. For me, if you haven't gotten, like, going and talking to Christ as they were, you had to know something about him if you're asking him something. If you've seen him heal, if you've seen him do things, if you've heard of his name, and though they may not have known for certain that he was the Son of God, they did know that he was doing some miraculous things.
So it almost sounds like when you say weak or strong, it's almost has to be an action that comes with it. So if you doubt, so let's say weakness, you doubt, and because of your doubt, you run and the other way, or you don't do what you're supposed to do, or you give up. But just doubting, like I said, doubt by itself, there seems to have to be an action that follows the combination of the thought and the action to make weak or strength in the context of what you're saying.
And action.
Mm-hmm.
So in,
Because doubt by itself doesn't
Is,
mean.
but doubt can.
well, let me ask this: is it, to her point, is there a relationship between doubt and faith?
Is there a relationship between doubt and
Yeah.
faith? There's
Can doubt serve to strengthen faith?
can doubt serve to strengthen faith.
Now you see those three words: doubt, strengthening, faith. Can doubt strengthen faith?
That's a wide open question.
That's it. Especially if you're doubt, but you do anyway.
Or let's go to John 20, 24.
John 20, 24.
What version of the Bible you have there, Marcelo?
New King James.
All right. You read that first.
Okay.
I'll read NIV second.
Okay.
And you read Amplified third.
Gotcha. All right.
So we're John 20, 24?
But you read in 24 to 29.
Okay. Now Thomas, called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said to him, "We have seen the Lord." So he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the print of the nail, and put my finger into the print of the nail, and put my hand in his side, I will not believe." And after 8 days his disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, the door being shut, and stood in the midst and said, "Peace to you." Then he said to Thomas, "Reach your finger here and look at my hand, and reach your hand here and put it into my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing." And Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord, my God." Jesus said to him, "Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed."
My version has now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hand, and put my fingers where the nails were, and put my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and God." Then Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have believed."
Okay. This is, Amplified is different. You said from 19?
24
to 29.
24 to 29. See, Amplified starts weird. It starts like 19 with that. The peace be unto you, is like verse.
Amplified?
Yeah. Yeah. So Amplified starts weird. It starts because after 24 is.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's a lot in there. Peace be on. All right. Here we go. Yeah, it's just a lot. It's a lot of parentheses. I don't use this version at all. But Thomas, one of the 12 disciples, who was called Didymus, the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples kept telling him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the marks of the nails, and put my fingers into those nail prints, and put my hands into his side, I will never believe." 8 days later, the disciples were again inside the house, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came through the doors, though the doors had been barred, and stood among them and said, "Peace to you." Then he said to Thomas, "Reach here with your finger and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it on my side. Do not be unbelieving, but stop doubting and believe." So this is a great example of what I'm trying to articulate here. And I guess, yeah, it's hard to put in perspective. There's a standard that I see with God with certain things.
Sorry, hold on.
Yeah.
Gabrielle chimed into the conversation. I want to include her right quick.
Is
She said,
this the Gabrielle I know?
Yes. I don't think, well,
I think.
I'm assuming,
Yeah.
I don't think,
She says, "I think."
or I think, faith is the same as confidence. It's more of a relationship because, I think she said,
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah,
I don't think faith is the same as confidence. It's more of a relationship because faith is about belief and confidence is about the sturdiness of your faith in those beliefs. Well, let's do Hebrews 1. Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11 was 1 or 11? It's 11.
11:1.
Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see.
And I got amplified.
11:1.
Now, faith is the assurance, parentheses, title, deed, confirmation of things hoped for, divinely guaranteed, and the evidence of things not seen, the conviction of their reality.
Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen.
Okay.
So yeah, that's where I want to paint this the right way. When I say there's an unmovable line when it comes to certain things that God is not willing to move us from, but to get and make sure we're there.
God has an expectation.
Well, I don't know about expect.
That's not it? Okay.
That's a different word. Expectation. That's a hard one. I think there's a line He wants us to get to, and there's a way that we need to get to this point. And sometimes He allows us to go different ways to do certain things, but then there's certain things that He won't allow us to waver from, because He knows that if we waver from this, then we're not going to get there.
Okay.
I hope I'm painting this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of an. Okay. In raising our children, there's certain things that we allow them to do, and there's certain things that we're going to absolutely not.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
I feel like faith is one of those. Absolutely not. You're going to do this way. You have to do it this way. Because even as He told Thomas here, stop doubting and believe. You want to put your hands in my side? Great. You want to touch the holes? And I found that He did this mocking Thomas, saying, "This is what you needed. Stop being that way." Because
being weak.
basically, stop being weak. You walk with me, and yes, they walked with Him, and many of them did not understand. I don't think any of them, as He reiterated time and time again, I have to die and then come back in 3 days. And then there was never a conversation until towards the very end. Mm-hmm. He would say this throughout the Gospels, and then we would go into something else. It was almost as if He's planting seeds, and He didn't even say, "Hey, did you hear what I just said?" He just, "Okay, y'all didn't get it. All right, we're gonna keep moving." But when this issue happened here, the others are telling him, "Hey, we saw him," and he's like, "Well, I'm not gonna believe until I see it." And so his response was, "This is what you need to see. Here it is. You happy? Now stop being, stop being an unbeliever and believe, because there's gonna be people who come after you who are not going to get this benefit, and you have to be the one who has to go carry this message. Mm-hmm. So I need you to be strong in this." So I mean, it's not like He was punishing, but He was firm in this.
Mm-hmm.
Gabrielle had a question.
Uh-oh.
Good.
She said, "Are you talking about weakness of the spirit or the mind, or both?"
Yeah, Donnell is saying faith is not proven, faith is belief.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, faith is not proven, faith is belief.
Actually, while English has two words, the original language, I think one is a verb and one is a noun of the same word, faith and belief.
Okay, yeah.
Same word.
Right. As I've defined
Well,
belief.
it comes from the same root word, but one is like a verb and one is a noun.
All right.
Okay.
I think faith is a noun and belief is the verb version or that word. When you take the verb of it, it translates belief, and when you take the noun of it, man understands it translates to faith. But it's the same root word. And we can do a word study at another time, or even later tonight. But I just wanted to, as we talk about faith and belief, at least the way the Bible perceives it, there's a the way we in English, our English language separates them out as two different things,
Yeah.
Right.
and it's not necessarily two separate things.
Right.
Gotcha.
I like our definition of belief in terms, because I link that to faith, and that when I read it once and it never left me. Belief is mental acceptance of the truth, actuality, or validity of a thing.
Hmm.
So I link that directly to faith. So and I say that to answer Gabrielle's question: weakness of the mind or weakness of, what was it she said?
Spirit
Of the spirit,
or both.
or both. I believe if you're weak in mind, you're weak in spirit. If you're weak in spirit, you're weak in mind. I don't think you can divide those two things, because from the heart, the mouth speaks. Our mind, our heart are one. So I don't think we have a division between them. But it requires that mental acceptance of the truth, the actuality, or the validity of a certain thing, in order for us to have faith in it or to believe it. And when I see that, I see Christ saying, "Am I not the truth?" I've said that. Am I not valid?
Hmm.
I'm doing on. Am I not actual? Yes. So there's no room for error. There's no room to doubt what I'm telling you. So that's yeah. I'm glad. I'm really working this, because when I see these things, and when I see I see God doing certain things in people's lives, I receive it a little better, because we've said constantly that He's always building towards something for the individual, for the people, for the world. So it's not just, I'm gonna be harsh for harsh sake, or I'm gonna come down, I'm gonna tell you not to cry at your wife's death just because I don't want to see you cry. There's a purpose for this.
Hmm. Hebrews 11:6.
And we're here in Hebrews. Can somebody else? I don't like the Amplified. This is way too many words.
Then read it in New Living Translation. Then go ahead. You read New Living Translation. The reason I was looking for Amplified is because in the parentheses they give additional context to
Yes.
the meanings of the words, and
Okay.
so it's like,
I'll go there. 'Cause I don't like New Living Translation, so I'll go there. But without faith, it is impossible to, walk with God and please Him. For whoever comes near to God must necessarily believe that God exists, and that He rewards those who earnestly and diligently seek Him.
that's the line.
That's that's the line, right?
He wants us to have faith, because without faith, without confidence in who He is, without believing that He exists, and without diligently seeking Him, then we ain't gonna do what He says.
We won't, right?
Mhm.
As we go through the journey of what we've been reading this week, no relationship leaves a lot of room, leaves a lot of space. No faith leaves a lot of space for a lot of things to enter our heads, and then we start doing things. So I'll let Marcy, because I know she was dealing with that this week with Judges, and that's why I believe he's really hard on this, because he understands what's around us. He sees what we don't see. He knows what we can get into, and he knows us better than we know ourselves. And he knows the best way for us to navigate the course that he's laid out for us to do the work that he put us here to do is through relationship with him.
Agreed.
And the only way to do that is to be intentional about drawing near to him.
It's active seek and active pursuit. Yes,
Active seek. I mean,
active pursuit. Yeah. Hmm.
do we have a word more powerful than active pursuit?
I say active because you could passively pursue something.
Right. So
That's why I chose active pursuit.
active seems we need something a little more,
Intentional.
yeah, like
Intelligence. It's the same.
the example that he gave, the man who found that there was a field and there was something, he sold everything to buy the field. That's a little more than active. That is aggressive. That's like an aggressive pursuit. I think there's there's a lot more to it. He wants us going after him in that way, I feel. Because if we're doing it that way, then we don't leave room for the adversary.
About wholehearted. So you'll seek me and find me when you seek me with your
Whole heart. Yeah. So yeah, alright, so now it's coming out. Let's get there. That's what I was, so all of this is in my head, and that's what I'm thinking about all week long when I read this. And I'm trying to apply this to my life in areas where I'm not doing it.
Before you go on,
Yeah.
is there a difference between doubt and unbelief?
Yes. Big difference between doubt and unbelief.
Did
Thomas,
Did Thomas doubt or did he unbelieve?
well,
Was he-
from Thomas's very own mouth, I won't believe. Thus, there's no doubt he's not believing. Doubt says, maybe, I don't know. If you're,
So doubt could strengthen faith.
doubt could strengthen.
Because if I'm uncertain and I actively pursue or wholeheartedly pursue,
Yes.
my faith could become affirmed.
There we okay. So I see what you did there. I like that. I like that. Good. Good. This is why he's the teacher. Yeah, that's important. That's important to know.
Can I add a verse?
Oh, please.
Revelation chapter 21, verse 6 to 8. Revelation 21, 6 to 8. And we'll read it in all three versions again.
Okay.
Because I like how they choose the words here.
All right. You have it. I'll start since you know it.
You said 21, right?
21:6. Yeah. 6 through 8. All right. And he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the one who thirsts, I will give water from the fountain of the water of life without cost. He who overcomes the world by adhering faithfully to Christ Jesus as Lord and Savior will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowards and unbelieving and abominable who were devoid of character and personal integrity and practice or tolerate immorality, and the murderers and the sorcerers with intoxicating drugs, and idolaters and occultists who practice and teach false religions, and all the liars who knowingly deceive and twist truth, their part will be in the lake that blazes with fire and brimstone, which is the second death."
How does your version read?
And he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give of the fountain of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexual immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake, which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death."
Mine says mostly the same thing. It is done. I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Of course, he said to me, "To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. To those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death."
I think that's well said.
Who leads the list?
The cowards.
And who else?
Unbelieving.
Unbelieving. Then that's what I was saying in terms of there's a all right, you can correct me. There's a seeming disdain to those who walk timidly, for those who are half-hearted, for people who are not actively or aggressively pursuing. Because if you're cowardly, if you're unbelieving, I think those two lead the list intentionally.
I was going to ask, do you think it's in any particular order?
I find that, well,
I just thought it was interesting that
yeah,
the first two are not the ones you think are necessarily, we know murderers are bad, we know sexually immoral is bad, we know magic arts are bad, but being afraid, is that really that bad?
Well,
Yes,
yes.
and that's where I'm.
Yes.
That's what I'm
Yes,
saying.
That's the action.
Those
That's
we
the
talk
action.
about gateway drugs all the time now. Cowardly and unbelieving are the gateway to all those other things. If you're not strong in Him, if you're timid about coming before Him in the way that He's laid out for us, you're liable to fall into those things. And there's a verse somewhere. Someone said it. Falling into diverse temptations. I can't remember where it is now, but
So this goes to the question I had before as far as action. Because when I think of coward, and maybe I'm wrong, but to be a coward, like, can you be a coward without not kind of showing some version of it? Like, are you a coward just by saying something, or are you a coward by either doing or not doing something? What makes you a coward? Because I can think of the situation in my head, what would make someone a coward. You're down, you hear something downstairs, and you don't want to go check because you're scared, or you're a coward because you hurt someone, you smack someone, you stab someone in the back, even like literally, because you don't want to fight them.
Let's do this.
yeah.
The only measure of what you believe is what you do. If you want to know what people believe, don't read what they write. Don't
Right.
ask them what they
So,
believe.
there you go.
Just
That's also
observe what they do.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can read Proverbs 27:19 right quick.
Faster this way. Proverbs 27:19. Yes. As in water, face reflects face, so a man's heart reveals the man.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And who knows the heart?
And the heart is revealed through actions.
Yes, that's the way.
Just-
That's how we know Him. We know through the actions, but God.
Yeah,
knows
we know
the
God
heart
knows
first.
the heart, but then,
Mm-hmm.
like I
And
said,
then-
you can see that.
We go back to Revelation chapter 20. The sea gave up the dead, and that were in it, and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to not what they believed, but what they had done.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they had done revealed what they
They
believed.
believe.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
This is, and so this is what. That's why I see that as very important. I don't think. Well, I never believe God says anything just randomly. He says, "I'm the Alpha and Omega." He puts this together. He's doing it for a reason. We may not have. He may not have been clear about it at that point, but I believe in time we then begin to see. Oh, that's what that
Can I
is.
add one more thing?
Oh yeah.
The word here for unbelieving in Revelation 21:8 is the exact same word that Jesus tells Thomas not to be. It's the exact same word. When he says stop doubting, he's not really saying stop doubting, he says stop being unbelieving. It's the exact same
Yes.
word.
Because Thomas was unbelieving.
Yes. He was refusing to believe.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't uncertain.
Right. But he said, "I will until I see it. I will never believe it, or I won't believe it." That amplified version. Now that's stuck in my head. But yeah, that's
And it manifested in his
in his
actions.
actions.
In his words and his actions and the way he postured himself and how he approached the situations.
So, what do we say then, in terms of the place of strength that I believe God wants us to see things from? Is that making any sense to anybody?
Mm-hmm. Isaiah 26:3. Mm-hmm.
What's that? Is it 26:3? Oh,
A place of strength.
you got me in that class. I'm just gonna stay there. Isaiah 26:3.
Mm-hmm.
You will keep in perfect and constant peace the one whose mind is steadfast, that is, committed and focused on you in both inclination and character, because he trusts and takes refuge in you with hope and confident expectation. So that's the road, the gravel road that you've just smoothed out, so that everyone can hopefully understand. I have a more militant view. I'm trying to make it a little easier, because I'll say things and then it just won't. Was that?
No, the guys.
Yeah, she did.
Land properly.
Yeah, it doesn't land properly. It comes down hard, and so that's one of the biggest things when we first got married. That was one of our biggest conversations. It's not what you say; it's how you say it. So 21 years later, I'm still trying to learn
How to say
how to say it. So that's been my struggle for the week, and finding that I relate to a lot more of these stories because I'm seeing it through this lens, this perspective of strength, not through our common view today. And I can only speak for American culture, which is we give participation trophies, and it's okay to be a victim, and it's okay to not achieve. Yeah, that was one of the verses we put in Corinthians. Paul says, the one who runs the race runs to win. I can't say that that's what I'm seeing right now. It's now everyone's story is important. Everything that happens in your story defines who you are, and it's okay if you don't, because this is your story, not this helped you become who you are as in the better part, but only the worst parts.
Right.
And I wrestle with how to relate that to people, because everyone here on this earth has had some struggle. No one is exempt from tough times. But I mean, and tough again is relative to the people or to a person. So what are we celebrating? Why do we push this so heavily? And knowing that our wrestle is not with flesh and blood, but with principalities, things on high, I find that this push for victimhood, a community of victims, is what we're pushing, not in the scripture.
So you're talking about the shifting of responsibility.
I'm talking about the shifting of responsibility. I'm talking about the celebration of
Deficiency.
your pain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So someone now, okay.
But isn't there strength in that though? Don't you have to be strong to be able to do that?
And you have to be strong to be able to say it, but not today. Now you don't. Now it used to be when you held something inside you. You held it because you didn't want anybody to know. Now people can't wait to tell others what happened to them.
Because there's strength in that. That's the benefit of testimony. Like,
it depends on how it's done.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm gonna make sure you finish saying what you're gonna say.
I was gonna say that's the what I would call it Mary J. Blige principle. She got strength off of talking about her pain, and when you identify with it, know that somebody else dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with, you get strength. And then when you hear that by talking about your pain, you got strength. You get strength not only from just releasing it, but also from knowing that in releasing it in its raw form, that other people are drawing strength off of it. So
I think so. Intention, obviously, intention plays a big part of that. What's your intention for doing it? But there's always there's always shifts in society. So, like you were just saying, people held things in because at one point they felt that was strength, and then there becomes a shift and people tell things because there's a shift that's strength.
Right.
But now there's another shift where you're taking that principle where you feel the strength, but there's a new strength developing around being the victim. And unfortunately, where it started with finding strength and putting your voice, it's now leading to this place of, they call it vulnerability, but it is celebrating.
Yeah.
It's celebrating something and now it's celebrating something that's dangerous because now people are looking for reasons, finding ways in which, and again, this is in general. Obviously, not everyone, like I started off saying, it depends on the platform where you're doing it. All of that matters.
Yeah.
But as far as socially, there's a dangerous trend where it's leaning into a place of glorifying a place of where you can say, I don't want to use weakness, we're done with that, but glorifying a lack of, I don't know, maybe even responsibility can go in various directions with that.
Two things that happen, and like we used to watch these reality singing competitions. One of the biggest reason why I can't stand them now. I absolutely cannot stand them. It's because there are people who advance not because of their talent, but because of their backstory.
Yeah, it makes for good TV, man.
Makes for good TV, but it doesn't make for what the objective of the show
It's
is.
good TV. Objective of the show is good TV.
Okay.
See, that's what you try to tell them.
Right. So
Your objective and their objective are two different things.
So the objective that they say the show is about, finding the next great talent.
Yeah, but the next great talent, you got to factor in the backstory, because that's the backstory is what makes a good talent.
Did we care about Gladys Knight's backstory?
We did care about 50 Cent getting shot 9 times. We cared
No,
about that. That's
I-
how he got big.
No.
Yes.
No. That gave him an avenue to find Dre and Eminem, but he still had to come out with In the Club, which was a heater. You had to come out with something
Before
good.
you-
Yeah,
That's
but
right.
when you heard the song, he was the guy who got shot 9 times.
Yeah.
So the backstories, I'm saying,
But
the
it-
backstory is important to the creation of a star.
True. Now, not always though. Like I said, Gladys Knight. What's her backstory? Don't even
We
know.
don't know everyone's backstory.
Right, we don't know everybody's backstory, but we know their talent level, and we know they have one. Backstory can help, but you still have to have talent. These shows now, these people aren't as talented, but they vote them through because they
makes
had
for
an
good
abusive past.
Makes
And
for
like,
good
yeah,
TV.
and it does. It makes and it doesn't even make for good TV because they're not very talented. I mean, I can't
They get
sing,
kicked
but
off.
and they get kicked off immediately. So I'm like, why? You just took the spot of
So
somebody.
if
who's
we're
more
watching
talented.
it, if we're watching it and debating about it, then the objective is being met. And so that's all I'm saying is you have to be mindful of what the objective is and what it facilitates. Like, for example, with this forum, you know, I have a lot of people who tune in and go, "What are they talking about tonight?" Well, we don't really know because, you know, the nature of the forum is to facilitate your coming with your own thing. Yeah, but that's gonna lose me. But the objective of this thing is not necessarily the viewership,
Right.
but the facilitating of the study.
Right.
And so objectives matter.
Okay,
And I only say that because of where you started about, you know, God is trying to get us to a certain place.
Right.
So the objective matters.
so to bring that back to that, because the other thing that happened was we were watching an award show and they brought up all the people on stage who were people who had attempted suicide, and they brought them up on the stage. There's a song about them, about how it's, you know, you don't neglect these people, which I agree, you don't overlook this as it's not a problem,
Awareness.
but bringing them up on stage, and this is a big award show, what does that say to our culture, which is thirsty for attention? What kind of message does that say?
Depends on who's looking, because it could very
You
clearly
had-
say you're not alone. If you're sitting on at home and having thought of suicide,
Yeah.
look at all these people who've been there. I'm not alone. So that's one message that could be received.
it's also you too can be up on stage
Or get some
because
attention.
bass, and that's unfortunately.
Perspective matters, yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a lot of people. We are starved for attention. People are starved for fame. You have people now whose life goal is, I just want to be famous. That was frowned upon before because you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Famous for what? I just want to be famous. Well, that's not a smart goal.
Fair
Now,
enough. That is true. Men that love themselves.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where I see us saying, celebrate this, as opposed to, okay, this is a step. You're dealing with this, but let's not deal with it in the way where you're going to end things. Let's deal with it in a way where we can help you get to a place where you can see fulfillment.
Okay.
You may not be on the stage, but you're going to be in a place where you found why all that you went through happened.
Okay.
Not so much with, just, oh, we're going to celebrate you because it's the thing to do right now. That makes, it's different from, someone like Mary J. Blige saying what she says about her strength,
So-
because she's accomplished some things.
The challenge of this particular position is that Jesus lived a straight and narrow life with good intentions and was referred to as a glutton and a wine bibber.
By a certain sect of people.
So again, it's you could do everything right
Yeah.
and everything with good intentions, and depending on who's looking, it could be skewed. So I'm saying, even with your example of the suicide, it could have been that maybe one of the producers or one of the stars on the show says, there's an issue we need to draw attention to, and we have this enormous platform to draw attention to and let people know that they're not alone, and have people identify with people that they recognize who've been where they are, to hopefully inspire them that they can go to do better. And then you have people saying, why are we shining a light on this? It's glorifying the thing. And so it really only matters, your perspective will shift the way you see it. Somebody said to me once, all roads lead to Rome or to Jerusalem. Depends on where you're looking.
Okay. Okay.
So your perspective becomes your reality. It's not necessarily reality, but it becomes your reality. Let's read one more verse. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I think it's verse 7, but I need you to read it in the Amplified.
Yeah.
Just verse 7, I think it is.
Yeah.
Because I like what the Amplified did with that particular verse 7. Well, 4 to 7, but particularly verse 7.
You said 4 to 7. All right.
No, sorry, what chapter?
1 Corinthians. One of my favorites.
1 Corinthians 13.
Yeah, one of my favorites. All right. Love endures with patience and serenity. Love is kind and thoughtful, and is not jealous or envious. Love does not brag and is not proud or arrogant. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not provoked, nor overly sensitive and easily angered. It does not take into account a wrong endured. It does not rejoice at injustice, but rejoices with the truth.
Right, so this is the verse here.
When right and truth prevail. Love bears all things regardless of what comes, believes all things, looking for the best in each one, hopes all things, remaining steadfast during difficult times, endures all things without weakening.
It's that line about looking for the best.
Yes.
Love has the perspective of trying to redeem or find value in anything. So it's less of a jaded perspective that assumes negative motivations, and that's kind of what allows you to be able to forgive, because you're always going to believe the best about any individual or any situation and anything, even if they have a repeated pattern of falling or falling short. doesn't necessarily say that you're gonna, you know, enable
Yeah.
bad behavior, but it's always believing the best. And so I say that to say that's a key element of perspective. You know, in terms of what we're just talking about.
That's good.
Yeah. All right. That's an interesting place, and I see that. I see a lot of other. Because with this chapter, I really enjoy this. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 13 is like the Psalms 23 of the New Testament, and Paul is saying a lot in this. But love's not naive,
No,
right?
no, it's not.
It sees through certain things because it knows at the heart of it there is something the Lord made, something that can be redeemed, but it's not going to overlook things that should be called out. It doesn't overlook an injustice,
Correct.
just as he goes into say it bears all things, but it's not it's not foolish. So yes, my view is if you're going to put out something that can kind of shift the balance, probably best not shift the balance, something that's going to that could possibly open up a doorway for more harm than good. And I mean, I won't say the slightest bit, but I mean, if there is enough concern, then shouldn't be done.
Fair enough.
That's, yeah. So,
Okay.
but I do get what you're saying, and that's something that I wrestle with a lot because we're trying to, on an individual level, relate to people's inner godliness. Not trying to help them find, just trying to relate to it. And by doing so, forgiveness is big on us. We're not allowed to do anything outside of that because we too have been forgiven. And that our godliness has been found and touched by God and now pulling doesn't mean that anyone else is lesser.
Agreed.
So that's where I try to live in this space right here. I don't want to bring the judgment on people, but there are just certain things that you notice and you say, that's not good.
So you have a question. Is faith on a spectrum? I was under the impression that no one has arrived and that our faith grows through our experiences. If that is the case, then are we judged on the sum of our actions, or are we judged based on where we are at the time we committed any act?
Well, that's an interesting question. I know I go back to what I said in the beginning when Paul said you do that, you live up to what you've attained. And we can't judge. God is the only judge for these things. So he knows what we know. We know what we think we know. And on that's when we are before judgment. He looks at us and says, either well done or depart from me. And he will be able to account or list to us outside of what you did for the least and all those things, what you believe, what you did. Were you a coward? Were you unbelieving? Were you any of those other things? Those factor in as well.
So I have a couple of verses to answer that question. We already read one, Proverbs 27:19, but can we also read Matthew 7:20?
Matthew 7. Oh, okay. Which one you want first? What version?
Well, you could actually read from 17. You know what? Read from 16.
Yeah, 16. Yeah. Okay. By their fruit you will recognize them. That is, by their contrived doctrine and self-focus. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the unhealthy tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by the fruit you will recognize them as false prophets.
Continue on to 21.
Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Back to our main point of recognizing that connection and of fulfilling purpose through faith.
Read up to 23.
Many will say to me on that day when I judge them, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name and driven out demons in your name and done many miracles in your name? And then I will declare to them publicly, I never knew you. Depart from me. You are banished from my presence, you who act wickedly, disregarding my commands.
Verse 24.
So-
You're not. Sorry. What verse are you on?
23.
You're about to read 23?
About to read 24 now.
Yeah, 24.
So everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man, a far-sighted, practical, and sensible man who built his house on the rock. And the rain, I'll just keep going.
So I don't have to read that.
Are you sure?
I wanted to get the ones who hear the words of mine and put them into practice. Like you cannot divorce the action from the stated posture. Like the thing says, not everyone who says Lord, Lord, meaning not everyone who says Jesus is my master.
Yeah.
Only the one who actually his actions reflect that Jesus is my master.
Yeah.
Right? The one who does the will of the Father in heaven. And you can't, if you are a mango tree, you're not going to bear strawberries because strawberries don't even grow on trees.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So the evidence of your faith is revealed in the things that you do. And to answer her question more specifically, yes, I would agree that faith grows and deepens and strengthens. That's clearly evident in the life of someone like Abraham, who had a simple faith that God said come and go, but you saw in this 25 years before he gets to killing his son, his faith grows. But had he died the day of God asking him, was his faith enough to in that moment demonstrate a trust in God? Did his action reveal his trust in God in that moment?
No, probably not, since his fathers were worshiping other gods before that, so he wouldn't have had.
But when he picks up and leaves, though, does his faith reveal by it? Because it says the Bible says, righteousness was credited to him because of his
action,
his faith. His faith was revealed in his picking up his family and moving.
Right.
And so, yes, spectrum. But as what was the phrase? How you categorize it? You said, what's the phrase you used? You used the phrase just now.
Oh man.
Basically, you get judged on what you know. Right?
Oh yeah. Paul's. We live up to what we have already attained.
We live up to what we've already attained.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just and you brought up Abraham. Jacob is also that great example of going on the journey and beforehand going, well, if this God that you told me about does anything, then I'll come back and build an altar. That's doubt, but that's the journey. So the doubt, building faith, creating a relationship, and then the actions.
There's a constant back and forth. There's a push and pull on the muscles and the breakdown of the muscles and the development of the muscles. Like, you could have faith in one moment to pick up your family and leave, and then lie about your wife.
Right. Yes. And we can't judge that because that's an area where he's raw. It's an area, and we look at it and we go, oh man, I thought you were a pillar. I thought you were like, no, he became that. But he was allowed to exercise his flaws as he grew, and we don't allow that to.
And so one of the things I want to say clearly is that while we will be judged by what we do. We are not in a position to assess what someone does as revealing their faith necessarily.
Right.
That is something I would, reserve exclusively for God to be able to do. And then when He comes back and He will say, "You see this thing here? You look at it. Tell me if this reveals," and He will do it after the fact with His own measuring stick and standard that we may enlighten us to.
Yeah.
But it becomes therefore a fair assessment.
Right.
Yeah.
To reveal the nature of the heart. But I want us to caution against looking at the spectrum of anybody's life, because that dude in Judges, Jephthah, just reading his story, he was a gangster. I mean, he was what's the guy named from New Jack City?
No, Wesley Snipes' character.
He was Nino Brown.
Nino Brown, that's right.
I mean, that's what he was.
Yeah.
So, how he ended up in the Hall of Faith?
Yeah. And was it God raised them up? So we had Matthew 7:1 echoes what you were saying. Don't judge. And don't criticize. Don't judge.
But for my own self-assessment of my own faithfulness, is my faith informing my choices and my decisions?
That's what.
Is my current understanding and my growing understanding demonstrated in the decisions and the choices that I make? Do they reveal trust in God, or do they reveal unbelief?
Yeah, and that's the wrestle that I've been dealing with throughout the week and throughout these. Now realizing I've been dealing with this once we started with these, because it's very important that we do it, and we allow ourselves to make the character flaws or make the mistakes, as long as we're pressing towards the mark that we're supposed to.
You know what? I would even take that back and say not so much my choices, but my posture. My posture and my choices. I think I'll say it's both. Because not of all David's choices revealed necessarily his faith, but his posture definitely did.
Yeah.
And that stood in stark contrast to Saul's posture. It stood in very stark contrast to Saul's posture. Yeah, alright. We can go ahead.
Okay.
Because we still get into 1 Corinthians 10. We're still sat and painting the picture for that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's. I like what you just said there. Okay, posture as opposed to. Yeah, that changes a lot. That changes a lot.
Like Thomas's posture was, I will not, until you show me, I will not.
Yeah.
It assumed a kind of authority on my part to be a judge, to be a decider.
Right. And that's the danger of that strong position, that I find God would rather deal with that rather than the person who is timid or cowardly. Thomas basically is saying, prove to me. And when you step out of it, look, you go, you want God to prove to you something. He's been telling you the entire time.
Gideon was timid and cowardly,
No, he wasn't.
He was hiding.
No, okay. So
when the angel came to him, what he was doing?
He was doing a smart thing.
It was.
And this is why I say this. All right.
Yeah, but what was motivating his smart thing?
Staying alive.
Fear.
Okay. Fair. To say fear. But also, is it? I think we have to also bring into the argument wise versus foolish. If you know there's danger out there, are you going to go out and do your normal day-to-day stuff in a place where you know they're hunting people down? Why do it? Let's get to a spot where I can safely do what I need to do and live another day. Because that's a smart thing. Where I grew up, there were places where I knew after a certain time, not best to walk. Let's take a detour. Was I afraid for my life? Yeah, a little bit, but I was more motivated by that's just dumb to want to die today. So I don't say he was. Let's look at that because there was. I'm glad you said that. Let's look at that. Let's look at Gideon's because there's a lot more that he said. That was Judges 6. Yeah. Yeah, because I actually had some notes in Judges 6 as well. But I need to let Marcy get in here and say something. Yes. All right, let's see. All right. So I think Gideon starts in like verse 11.
No, it's all of 6, but
For Gideon,
when you get started,
yeah, his comes in.
it's all of 6. It really starts in verse 1, but you can start at 11. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I think this is where we actually start talking about Gideon.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. So now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth tree, which was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash, the Abezerite, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in wine presses in order to hide from the Midianites. Now we know what happened before that with the Midianites and everything, and he was well aware of that. It's one of the notes that I had. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." Gideon said to him, "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are his miracles, which our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us from Egypt?" So, just his response to an angel of the Lord shows me that there's fear, yes, because you're hiding, but I don't believe that's the overall thing. I think that there's a hostility because he has to do this.
What verse 15? Oh, 14 and 15.
Okay, then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hands of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" So he said to him, "O my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." That doesn't say that you're afraid. That just says to me, I don't want to do this. That's a lot to ask. If God came to you and told you, "I need you to go stand before the president and declare a certain thing," you may or may not want to do that. If he told me that, I'd be like, "I don't want to do that." And I may say, why would he listen to me? He don't listen to anybody anyway. Why would he listen to me?
There you go.
So, because he said what he said to the angel, and yes, we know God proclaimed him to be mighty man, even though he wasn't at the time a mighty man of valor as we would see it. I still think that there are nuances
Fair enough.
to the story because I've lived that account and I relate to that. Going, if I know that people were hunting me over here, why am I gonna go over here? I'm gonna go over here.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean we all do it to a degree, right? I mean, so yeah, I mean to be fair to Gideon, that's what I got from that. But one of the things I did pull from that was the skew of the story. All right, Gideon asks, "Why is all this happening to us?" But before we saw why all this was happening to them. So his perspective was coming from almost like a victim, as if his people had no part in why they're in this situation.
Which we see in Genesis. The woman that you gave me.
Nah. So I found that fascinating that there, and I can see that in relation to today. There are people who are suffering certain things and they don't They don't recognize why they're in this spot.
Yes, there are instances where people don't recognize their contributions. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And once you get that thought in your head that this is happening to me, not for me or because of something that I may have did or my ancestors may have done, it turns you into something less like what God wants us to be, I think. I find.
So I'm with Chris on this, and I'm not sure that it matters.
Chris Gibbons, okay.
I'm not sure that it matters what
Okay.
the reason is. I'm going to, like you, say that no matter the reason, the objective is still the same, to get you to trust me,
Yeah.
to get us to trust him, no matter the reason, whether it was something that I did or didn't do, whether it was a consequence, whether I was like Job and had nothing to do with it.
Right.
The objective is the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the people come and tell Jesus, "Did you hear the story about the tower that fell on the people?" And he's like, "Yep. Study yourself,
Yeah.
because if you die, will you be in the right place?"
Mm,
You know, like, you know, don't worry about that. They dead. They're getting
Right.
taken care of.
right.
What about you right now?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's really all about, do I trust him?
Right. How do we course correct?
Yeah.
Or in a sense, or how do I get to where I'm supposed to be? Because we can't say course correct with Job so much. I find there was some stuff that Job had to learn also through his trial, and that's why
He learned to trust God.
he learned to trust even more. Like you're saying, perfect example of what we were talking about. Here's a man who was probably as close to walking upright as God Himself has said, "This is my servant," and then he slanted the road on him. Now he removed the road, and he's falling down a mountain, unbeknownst to him. He had no idea this was coming.
And he didn't do anything.
Didn't do anything, but something needed to be done for him, so that he can be better with his walk, and, you're
And
like,
others can be better in their
and
walk.
others can be better, and for us to all learn that you're important, but you're not that important, and you're never done while you're here. There's
But
always something.
But that's the key of faith. It's the submission to him, to trust him. It's the, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. You
Right.
know, lean not on your own understanding. Like that, to me, as you're saying, that's the line he's trying to move everybody to.
Mm-hmm.
And that all our interactions and all the happenings in our lives contribute to moving us towards that line.
Absolutely, agree wholeheartedly. What you got?
But you never got to 1 Corinthians 10 though. Like I'm still waiting
Oh.
to see, because all of this was a setup for the verse.
Well, I mean, it was like all of 1 Corinthians 10, but I mean, we can.
Yeah, but you were setting up to the verse.
Yeah, I don't want to dominate the whole thing again. I just let somebody else.
Yeah, but we never got to your verse. I still need to
Let's
see
just at least hear that.
Yeah, I don't.
what was the verse that all of this painting was.
Oh, right.
Well, again, it wasn't.
It was just all
It
of
was
this
like the
stuff.
entire chapter for some reason. As I
Mhm.
started reading it, the entire thing jumped out to me as see it through a different lens, see it through strength. There's certain verses like verse
See it
12.
through strength.
Yeah, see this thing through, see it through the eyes of someone being through strength. Verse 12, for instance, where it says, "Therefore let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall." Again, this is where he's dealing with, you're strong, but let's not be arrogant. Let's bring this thing down to a place of humility. Check what you're going through. Oh yeah, and then verse 24 was another. And then, again, why it spoke to me. Verse 23 and 24 also. All things are lawful to me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful to me, but not all things edify. This, for me, says, I have given you that freedom to make the choices. Be strong in the decisions that you make, because you don't have to subject yourself to the things that enslaved you before. And as Peter echoed, the thing that you submit to, that's the thing you succumb to, that's the thing you're a slave to. So he's given us that.
Are you talking about confidence or strength?
This is a strength here. Even before that, where Paul was talking about food offered to idols. You have to be strong enough. That next verse, actually, let me pull that one up. That let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. For me, that says a lot about. I was telling my wife, I thought about women with this. Arguably, women are sharper than us. They have
Arguably.
You can argue all you want.
I can admit, growing up in a house where my mom raised 2 kids and my community was 98% women, where the men ran off. That's a strength that we clearly did not display, and
Fair
it
enough.
still exists today. And that's just one facet.
That's one argument.
Women who had to, even better, women who went through the same schooling as men, excelled, graduated top of their class with men, but in that day had to say, all right, well, this is all fun, now I gotta go home and raise kids. Had to put aside all that they learned, all that they endured, knowing that they were better than many of these men, and had to watch those men take the jobs that they would probably fit better in. That's a strength that it takes to be able
It's
to
a
do that.
strong argument.
So,
We're building.
so when I see this, Paul is saying, listen, there is nothing on this earth that can encapsulate me anymore. My focus is heavenly.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But because everyone is not where I am, and I understand that everyone didn't get the benefit of seeing God on the highway and walking 3 years and learning, studying, I can understand that and make it my duty to make sure that they get there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can do whatever I want, but they can't. I'm not going to jeopardize what they believe.
I got it.
That's a strength that I find. So I think that's where it really started to drive home for me. It was like, yeah, if you believe that, if you truly believe that God has set you free, then you have all these things that Paul has, or that he's saying that we have, because we have the Spirit of God in us. We have the ability to overcome everything in the world. One of my favorite verses, 1 John 2:14. You're strong, the Word of God lives in you, and you've overcome the evil one.
All right.
We have to believe that,
Yes.
because in doing so, the adversary doesn't easily beset us with the thing. And that's where I'm saying with this celebration of victimhood, it doesn't allow for us to get to that place of belief.
Agreed. My only caution is to be sure that we are mindful of the source of our strength,
Yeah.
because it's a very easy move to pride. It's a quick, it don't take much to get to pride. When you get so confident in your strength that you start to think it's you. And so that's just a small caution.
Right, and that's why I started with verse 12. Let no one think that he stands, and take heed lest he fall.
Sweet.
Paul prefaced that wonderfully in this writing, because he painted the picture of being a winner, being a champion, being someone who's victorious. But he let it be known that it's not you. It's the one that's in you, and the one who did it for you.
Agreed. No,
So I think he wants us to adopt that mindset.
I'm with it.
What's up, Adam? I'm done.
You're done.
She just tagged me. She just tagged me out.
All right, so I'm gonna start with one, which probably won't go into a lengthy conversation, and then move into something else that you and I were discussing. So Judges 2:10. So this stuck out to me. So I'm going through, again, as you kind of mentioned, reading through a different lens, looking at the things that he's the Spirit's trying to speak to me as I go through this. And especially when it deals with, I mean, obviously we should be reading in a place where we're looking how he's working in our lives. So I'm in a place where I can no longer read this and look at it as them.
It's me.
Yes, exactly. And then the other thing is that I'm noticing patterns, and that kind of lends to the second thing I was going to bring up. But there's this pattern and rhythm that's going on there, and I can't help, as I was telling you, I can't help but to think of the movie The Matrix, which is one of my favorite movies, if not my absolute favorite. And so I'm reading the word now, and it kind of feels like, how they're looking on the screen and they could just see the patterns. They're like, oh, well, I see this and I see that when they're looking at the screen. And I'm reading and I was like, man, the pattern's really starting to jump out. Like, we're going through this. So with that, I'll just start with, in Judges 2:10, well, that's just one verse, but it's right after the death of Joshua. And the generation's been wiped out, because they've been through everything. With the Jericho, all of that's happened. And a whole new generation is coming. And so Joshua 10 says, when all the generations had been gathered to their fathers, another generation arose, and after them, who did not know the Lord, nor the work which he had done for Israel. So I'm looking at this, I'm like, so the immediate question is, well, why did they not know the Lord or what he has done? And it reminds me, because I deal with kids a lot and parenting and all of that. And I think about how I'm constantly having these conversations with people about the kids aren't raising themselves. Stop looking at kids like they're the issue. They had to get this way somehow. So when I read this, I just think about us now. I think of where we are now, and I'm just, I have to ask, why do they not know? Like, where does that come from? So I'm curious. I mean, obviously, I don't know if we can really know this and within going in deeper or not, but why?
That's a good question. There's a story, there's an illustration in one of the prophets where God tells one of the prophets to go and ask some people to drink liquor. And the people respond and say, ever since we know, our family doesn't do that, or something like that. I'm trying to remember what was the name of the people. I think it's Jeremiah, though. Either way, here it is. Jeremiah 35.
35, okay.
Jeremiah 35. It says, this is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord during the reign of Joachim, son of Josiah, king of Judah. Go to the Rechabite family and invite them to come to one of the side rooms of the house of the Lord and give them wine to drink. So when I get to Jazaniah, son of Jeremiah, and his brothers, and all the sons of the whole family of the Rechabites, I brought them into the house of the Lord, into the room of the sons of Hanan, son of the man of God. I ain't pronouncing all them names, right? Because they ain't really important. It was next to the room of the officials, which was over that of Messiah, son of Shalom, the doorkeeper. Then I set bowls full of wine and some cups before the Rechabites and said to them, drink some wine. But they replied, we do not drink wine because our forefather, Jonadab, son of Rechab, gave us this command. Neither you nor your descendants must ever drink wine. Also, you must never build houses, sow seed, or plant vineyards. You must never have any of these things, but you must always live in tents. Then you will live a long time in the land where you are nomads. We have obeyed everything our forefather commanded us. Neither we, nor our wives, nor our sons, nor our daughters have ever drunk wine, or built houses, or lived in or had vineyards, fields, or crops. We've only lived in tents, and we have fully obeyed everything our forefather has commanded us. But when Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, invaded his land, we said, come, we must escape to Jerusalem. We must go to Jerusalem to escape the Babylonian and Armenian armies. So we have remained in Jerusalem. Then the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, saying, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Go tell the people of Judah and those living in Jerusalem. Will you not learn a lesson and obey my words? Jonadab, son of Rechab, ordered his descendants not to drink wine, and this command has been kept. To this day, they do not drink wine because they obeyed their forefathers' command. But I have spoken to you again and again, yet you have not obeyed me. Again and again I have sent my prophets to you. They each said, each of you must turn from your ways and reform your actions, and do not follow other gods to serve them. Then you will live in the land I have given to you and your ancestors. But you have not paid attention or listened to me. The descendants of Jonadab, son of Rechab, have carried out the command of their forefather gave them. But these people have not obeyed me. Does that answer your question?
That's good.
I was leaning towards, they didn't disciple them properly, they didn't teach them properly, but that's not true, because God, even if they didn't, God sent people to teach them again and again and again and again and again. So why they didn't do it? They chose not to.
And even we would agree, Gideon was a part of this new generation of people, correct? Gideon himself said, "Where's the God who our forefathers told us about?" So there was some knowledge, but maybe in the action, or by and large, the people as a whole weren't reflecting the works, or as the writer, whoever the writer is, would say, these are godly people. It's like, no, they're not. By and large, they're not. There are a few, but not overall, no.
I will say though that proximity to an experience changes your changes how you relate to experience. Like if you were there and you saw it yourself, it has a little bit more weight on you than.
Yes.
But what this family demonstrates is, even if you weren't there,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
it shouldn't really matter.
This is very clear.
Yeah.
And then you see that same idea where what we were reading about Thomas in Revelation in John 20.
Yeah.
I think Jesus' comment was, because you have seen me, you have believed, but blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have believed. So there's that, you weren't a part of the 12 or the 50 people who saw Jesus alive, but you believe it just as much and live as if, And so, truthfully, it's just, the pattern is rebellion, stiff-neckedness. That's all that it really is. And, I was going to make an excuse, maybe they didn't see it, so they don't believe anymore. But this other family is faithful.
Right.
And they weren't even faithful to God. They were faithful to their forefather.
Right. So they knew what it was like.
So that explains, because when I looked at it, they said they did not know the Lord or know what he had done. So my other question was, meaning did they not know at all, which I highly doubt, or did not know of him, or did not, not know in the sense of not have a relationship, which again is what we're dealing with now, because a lot of us know him, but we don't have that relationship with him.
My Bible says they forsook the Lord.
Yeah.
In verse 12.
I like that better.
And then verse 13 says they forsook him again. So they neither knew the Lord or what he had done for Israel, meaning they didn't have that personal experience.
Yeah.
So they knew of him and not him.
Yeah.
Or they made the choice.
And they made the choice.
Right. So that makes
And
sense.
they made a choice not to have a fresh experience. Because they could have had a fresh experience.
Right.
I contrast that to later on in Kings, where the king who found the scriptures, which they clearly weren't using. So it was like, who is this God?
Yeah.
That's a little different than these people here.
Right, that's what I was kind of thinking as well. It's like,
Yeah, was that Joash?
And I would argue that Deuteronomy has Moses telling the people, when you go over into the new land, make sure you tell these stories when the people laying down, when they walk it, write it on the wall, write it on the doorpost, put it everywhere so people could see and remember, because you're likely to forget. So keep it always on your lips.
Yeah.
And likely it may have been, just slightly on the lips. Whereas I think with the Rechab family, they may have had it more forcefully on the lips. And, I think that, to me, that's why, to me, that family kind of reveals the importance or the value of the idea of discipleship, or what discipleship actually is, because it's teaching other people to live the way that you live.
Yeah. It's very important.
And so those people were discipled in the way of the forefather.
Right.
I can't necessarily say that these people were as well.
No. And
Although they may have been taught, they may not have been discipled.
Right. Disciples.
They may have had awareness, but they weren't discipled into the way. They may not. I could make an argument that they were not. But I'm sure someone else could make an argument that they are. But.
Okay. So the other thing that we had talked about, I think we kind of, I don't know, I can't remember if it resolved or not. So this is going back a little bit with Joshua and after Jericho, Achan, and
round one.
Right, round one. Yes, round one. When they had, when the 30-something people had died, and so this is our argument, because we tend to see things a little differently. So I look at God as just like gangster. You know, he just, hey, he just wipes you out. It's not fair. It's not about fair or not. He's got, again, going back to the patterns, I was like, he has to lay examples. And this leads to me being a disciplinarian too when it comes to the kids. But when the kids were younger, it was about laying an example, a routine, so they know how far they're going. So by the time, because what I was doing was preparing for terrible twos. And I said, well, I don't believe in terrible twos. I mean, we're not going to have that. We're not speaking that. Okay, so.
Did you live it?
No. No, we did not. We did not. Because we were preparing for it. So by the time they got the two, they already knew how far they can go with us. So what we laid out was, they knew my 5-finger group. So there was a discipline action, and they understood whenever they tried certain things, there were levels to their punishment, but when they tried certain things, they were going to get a response. And it takes time and consistency to do that. The key is consistency. So by the time they were trained, they knew I put my hand up and I start counting. They knew if I ever get to 1, they will feel something. You're going to get licks. They know that. So usually once they were trained well enough, by the time I got to 3, they try something. By the time I got to 3, my fingers go down. They knew. They stopped. Cut off.
It was guaranteed.
It was guaranteed that would happen. So when I look and I read and I look at what God is doing, I was like, it makes sense, because that's what he's doing. He's got to lay down the pattern and do the training so that we get it. Reading for it. So going to AI, and I always understand what Ron's argument is. So you can always, Linda, I'm not going to speak for you with that, but you were saying that about the warning, right? Not giving them release. Did he have to go in that direction? Did he have to allow those innocent people to die?
Like Ananias and Sapphira?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's almost the same action.
Right.
It's almost like the same story twice.
Almost.
Almost, because
and
they did it. Whereas in here, there was one person who did an action. He took something he wasn't supposed to, and these men went to battle, unknowing or knowing, we don't know, and they died for it, and so they had to lay the consequence. There was a consequence, and unfortunately, not just on him, Achan, but others. So the difference between him and Ananias and Sapphira was that they went out and did what they did.
Sapphira died.
And Ananias and Sapphira died. No one else died because of their actions. So I think that's the tricky part. But then you could say that about everything, because when I read through it, I see nothing but genocide. I see genocide going all through here. And that's another topic, because I'm thinking, well, people have issues saying that. But it goes by intent. We look at genocide, we look at, Rwanda and all these other tragedies that happen around the world. But that was man's intent behind it. It was man doing that. This is genocide that God's doing. And if God's doing it, God's doing it. So, I don't see
I mean, you can't argue that it's genocide.
Yeah.
But that God's doing it is an interpretation of the
Okay.
people who are writing.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Okay.
subscribe to the people who are writing,
Yeah.
but the people who are writing and telling the story are ascribing it to God
Yeah. As
or their God.
Okay, let me make sure I'm clear on what you're saying. So,
I'm saying that there are other people who's and other writings where other people are doing the same thing and ascribing it to their gods the same way.
gotcha. Okay, yes.
While I am going to believe, because I'm a Christian, that this is inspired by the one true God and that He is leading this genocide, it can very easily just be an interpretation. I'm choosing to believe that it
Yes.
was Him. But it also could just be the coloring of the interpretation of God. Why I'm going to believe is God is because these same people who saying God led us to wipe them out said God led them to wipe us out.
Right.
Yeah.
So
True.
to me, that kind of gives some credibility to their interpretation of events, you know. But it could, like if you take the story of Esther, right? If it's not in the Bible and you just read it, you think a series of circumstances, coincidences, story that worked out, right? You take the references to God out of the stories and you just see people at war.
Yeah.
Some dominant at one time and some dominant at the next time. You lift God out of it, and that's easily the stories that could be told in here. And the insertion of God is an insertion on the part of the writer of the story and how he's replaying the events.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And I say that because there's a book that they made me read on archaeology where there's at least one story, and I think there's a story of Sennacherib coming, the Assyrians.
Yeah.
The Assyrians interpret the same event differently.
Yeah.
The Bible says that, God says, I must send him back. When he comes to attack Hezekiah, and Hezekiah prays, and all of a sudden he packs up and goes home.
Yeah.
Right? And the Bible writer says it was God.
Yeah.
Sennacherib say, I had something else going on. I pick up and I went home. And so same event,
Yeah.
same actions, different interpretation of what was happening. Again, I do believe the Bible version,
Right.
but
Yeah, but
But I get
Yeah,
yeah.
it's-
Yeah.
that's what it is.
So you're saying that same thing could be happening today. We just don't have the written account of
Correct.
what God said. And even if we did, people wouldn't believe it.
here's another example. Perfect example. Job.
Yeah.
All Job knows is series of events kill Maturin.
Right.
I end up sick
Yeah.
and I suffer for a long time.
Yeah.
And then by a series of circumstances, everything was, I was given more stuff. And I'm no longer sick. You don't know that somebody was telling a story and he was a part of a plot, or just on the surface,
Yeah.
he's a man who suffered loss, got sick, and recovered. And so the interpretation is a key element to it. And that's where faith comes in.
Right.
Faith colors your interpretation and your perspective on how you process the events.
That's a good. Wow. That's a great perspective, because if we're going to, and this is why I was glad, because after we talked last Sabbath about the issue of, does the Bible promote salvation? Predestination for salvation. Daniel calls the next day.
Your son.
Yeah, my son. He's talking about a similar wrestling that he's having with some friends at school. But theirs is with mindfulness, which is trending now. And the things that he's saying from Scripture, they're saying from a different account. And so I think it's important that we have to have an understanding of what the other side is, or others are saying, because not everyone goes here.
Has the same kind of assumptions that we have. No.
Right. And again, like, it's faith for us. We have to believe that these words were given by God of all creation to these people, and all these things, though they lend themselves to be true, valid, accurate, as best as we can live it out today and see, but still doesn't mean that everyone has grasped it, and they have a different story
But this is an interpretation of the same events.
of the same event, and in their mind, it's valid. So yeah, that's very wow. I didn't even know that Sensorab had a version. I didn't know that.
He records his conquest.
Yeah.
So he interacts with that city and he tells the story one way, and he interacts with that state, and he talking about how his God helped him in this battle and his God helped him, almost the same way the Bible writer is talking about this,
Right.
which is true.
That's what I really appreciate about Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar's account was so impactful because it bridged both worlds. So much so he even had his own chapter in Daniel's story.
But even that is his own interpretation.
Right. But his interpretation lends to our story. As he said, that God sent me to go and take these people. And then he's the one that sent me into the wilderness. And now I recognize that he's the God of all.
Correct.
I love the bridge. And that's
That's
very
what makes
important.
him significant to me.
Yes, yes, he's very important to the story. I mean, to the overall story of things. Someone so great, and God still curved him, bent him, used him.
So one thing you do see from the Bible's interpretation in terms of pattern is that a lot of God's judgment on one group of people, he uses another group of people to execute his judgment.
Yeah.
And you see that kind of in the story of Saul, where Saul doesn't go and kill out, where he takes the king, he doesn't kill the king.
Yeah.
Because God meant, the Bible writer suggesting that God meant to execute judgment on them.
Yeah.
And when you come in the way with your own perspective on what should happen, you get in the way of me. You know, I promised you guys I was going to spank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sister come in and say, no, well, you know,
Yeah.
I threw away the belt, mommy.
Mm. Now you get the spoon.
Anybody tell you to throw away my belt? You and me and your brother have a date tonight. How you getting in the middle of
Right.
us?
Mm-hmm.
Go and bring your belt. And both of y'all gonna get it.
Right. Yep.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. No, that's spot on. Yeah. What else you got?
No, yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to bring up that as a discussion to see.
All right. So one last smaller thing I noticed is that, first off, I just really enjoy Joshua because, as I mentioned before, I love when things work in the scripture. And in Joshua's story, overall, the account worked, and I can see the growth of the people from the time of Moses and all their struggling to the generation of Joshua, where they got it and they executed to a degree of what they were supposed to do. I mean, they didn't nail it 100%. They were in the 90%. And even when they had issues, they discussed it. There's one chapter in Joshua where something was being built and they talked about this thing. They did as I believe we would all be beneficial from. And I think it was because of all that they went through with the time of Moses and the prepping for war and the battles to no war, which God echoes in Judges, with this failing of the new generation. And that they struggled because they didn't know war. They didn't know what it was like. They had that time of rest, and I think that's the most dangerous part for us as humans, is when we're not engaging in something that's on the precipice, something that God has us. We're not travailing, we're not in struggle, because when we're not, then we're idle. And in that idleness, we tend to forget. So that's like the problem with pain, is that it's necessary.
Yeah. Comfort kind of gets us complacent.
Mm-hmm.
What was you saying? Comfort is the conformity.
No, it's conformity. It was conformity. But there was something with comfort. I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Moses tried to warn them, y'all don't go in the promised land and forget.
Yeah.
Never go and forget. But the people who left Egypt as kids saw their parents die, went to the Red Sea and the Jordan. They were like, oh, we remember.
Yeah.
They were faithful for almost the whole time that they lived.
Exactly.
Because they were able to see the consequences, see the struggle, reap the promise. Like,
Right.
they have real incentive to stay faithful.
Yes.
Whereas the kids who come up with privilege,
There you
this
go.
all I know is
Back to square one.
all I know is this.
Right. Yeah. You said you crossed the sea. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I really enjoy Joshua's few books of the Bible. You can look at by and large and go, man, that worked. I enjoyed that.
So you see, because it's 10 o'clock, I think we should,
Yeah.
transition into takeaways, and if we want to linger, we could do that afterwards.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, a lot of them. But again, I believe that bar, that standard, will never be moved for us.
Agreed.
We'll go back to something. You were talking about something earlier that made me think, and I was like, that's gonna be my takeaway. Ready, I was prepared. So, it was about the judgment and just that reminder, because I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to struggle with. I want to continue to struggle with, and that is to not judge. So, and just coming with that understanding that judging others is above our pay grade, and always keeping that. And yeah,
My takeaway is a reminder as we started talking about faith and belief and whatnot. I remember I was reading the book of John one time. Because John uses the word believe a lot. I started wondering, well, what does it mean to believe? Because in English, you could cognitively understand something and believe it without responding in action. But it didn't seem like the Bible definition of belief included that.
Yeah.
And I had a post on it, and then my now sister-in-law, Audrey, she responded on something I kept. And she said, living faith has to have all three components or else it's dead. When one component is missing, there exists a cognitive dissonance. Belief without trust and obedience is knowledge. Trust can't exist without belief and obedience. So when your faith is tested, your response or reaction will either affirm your belief and trust or show discrepancies where what you thought you believed is not really what you believe. So living faith has three components: belief, trust, and obedience.
Man, that was good.
So
That was very good.
that's my takeaway.
that's good.
She said that today.
No, that's in 2015.
Still relevant.
Right, that was 2015.
As
She
a lot
typed
of
that.
things aren't. Right now.
When did you start it, David? I'm sorry. 2015, that's a long time.
Right.
That was 2015. Yeah.
Yeah, 4 years ago. That's a long time nowadays.
Yeah, Dad just started doing it.
Oh wow.
When did that happen?
That was February 26, 2015. All right. Vanessa, take it away.
It was just a thought or a reminder, really. Even if God might, in some cases, accommodate our fears like he did with Moses, plan A is the best plan. He'll give us a plan B, but there's consequences with that, like having his brother help out down the road. There's some issues with his brother feeling like, I was there, I have a little power situation going on in his mind. Well, initially the plan was just to have Moses. So, he will accommodate and help us with our fears, but the initial plan is always the best. So,
Yeah.
Indeed, initial plan is the best. All right. Well, thank you guys for the conversation tonight. I always enjoy chopping it up with you all. Yeah. Well, let's pray. Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you for your spirit. I thank you for Marcella and Ron and for their perspectives and insights. And even the wrestlers continue to guide and direct them into all truth so that their faith is deepened and strengthened and that they can inspire others to look to you so that they can experience that depth of intimacy and knowledge in their own lives, ordering their lives around their understanding of you and your will for them is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Alright guys, so till the next time, drink up, drink deeply, download the app if you don't have it already. It's Apple Store, Android, it's a free app, Bible reading plan. And if you need a hard copy, you're old school like me, and you'd like to be able to read it with your open Bible, email at info@waterforthethirsty.com and we can get you that for free. Yes, for free. We want to make sure you read your Bible, so we're doing all of this for nothing. So you don't have any excuses. That's the goal. Remove the barriers, remove the excuses, so that you can spend time with God and get to know Him for yourself. Alright, now, till the next time. Drink up.
Drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty. Drink. You're like water when I'm thirsty.